Everyone. Good morning. Welcome. It's a pleasure to see you all here. My name is Robert Milstein from Thought Leader Global, and I've organized this event in partnership with Vertex. I would like to test and see if you all can hear and see me. So if you can't, click on there's an emoji button at the bottom of your screen, a smiley face. If you can click that and give a thumbs up. I see an avalanche of thumbs ups. Very good. It's very nice. This is the way we show emotion nowadays. I think in the human languages of the world, one day will be replaced by just emojis and memes, and we'll just communicate everything by faces and pictures and cartoons, and that will just be it. But hopefully, we're not at that point yet. It's a real distinct pleasure to see all of you at this event. Our company normally does an annual indirect tax conference, but now we're also doing roundtables like this, and it's a nice way to bring everyone together for small, interactive, corporate-led discussions, so we can get insights from in-house indirect tax views on various issues. So it's really great to have all of you here. We have attendees from all over the world and from various types of organizations, companies, governments, universities. So welcome, everyone. A quick tour of the platform. During the event, during the discussions, if you want to add your comments, you can click on the chat tab on the upper right corner of your screen. You can see many chats already there. And then if you have a question, you can type in the Q&A tab right next to it. In fact, I would very much appreciate if you have questions to put them there instead of the chat tab. And if you want to actually later on join the stage and just come with us, join the stage and virtually show yourself, you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, and we'll bring you on stage. Great way to be involved in the event. And of course, feel free to share your emojis and the views and opinions during the event as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our moderator for this event, Peter Borhoff from Vertex. He's a VAT director from Vertex. Peter gave a keynote presentation at our Indirect Tax Exchange earlier this year and gave an excellent presentation, and it was good to hear that. He has a great deal of experience in indirect tax transactions, business restructuring, tax process optimization, and was previously at AkzoNobel. And when I was working with him and Neela from Vertex on this, we were discussing what would be a great theme for this event, and the theme of indirect tax and its involvement in finance transformation came up. And we felt that there would be a great way to bring everyone together to talk about this. So it's a pleasure to have you here, Peter, to moderate. I'm going to put myself on mute, and I recommend for other panelists maybe to do that when you're not speaking as well. And I'm going to hand the digital microphone over to you, Peter, and thank you for being here, and over to you.
Thanks, Robert, for having me, and even a greater thanks for the panelists to be in this panel discussion. There's such a wealth of experience and knowledge in this panel. When we started this, I wasn't expecting this much knowledge in the panel. So I'm very happy. I'm looking forward to the discussions. We'll be talking about indirect tax processes and how they fit in the wider finance transformation that many companies and enterprises are going through. And in order to set the scene first and to have a kind of a same starting point, I would first like to address the question to the panel, basically. Well, okay, what actually do we see as finance transformation? Is this a complete restructuring? Is this a centralization in shared service centers? Do you include ERP deployments? Is it even wider? So I'm happy to hear what my colleagues are thinking. And Joe, please allow me to start with you as kind of also a tax transformation lead.
Okay, Peter, you can hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I guess I work for Medtronic. We're a medical device company, probably the biggest in the market globally. And my role is both VAT director and tax transformation leader. What we mean by tax transformation leader is looking at operationally how we do things within the tax function. So to answer your question, when I think of finance transformation, I think of the work that's done within finance, where it's done, who does it, to what extent that can be automated, to what extent it can be done in-house in the shared service center, or alternatively outsourced. And in our context, how it's done, we look at technologies like Alteryx, Power BI, Tableau, Power Query. So these are all things that contribute to how the work is done. And essentially, we're always looking at what is value add and doing more of that. And to do more value added activities, you got to cut down the non-value add. So you got to automate or outsource or somehow eliminate that type of activity. So that's, in a general introduction statement, that's what I think of finance transformation.
Thanks, Joe. Any additional comments or thoughts from anybody else from the team?
Yeah, I think that, well, it's always something that is in support of the business, and it depends on the size of the business. Like Joe said, if you work for a multinational, it's scalability and standardization comes in. That's your overarching goal. And working with a shared service center could then be a tool to achieve that standardization and scalability. If you're a medium-sized entity, then, using an ERP system with more functionality could be labeled as a finance transformation. But I think it's key that you link it to an overall business goal, so that it's not a goal in itself, the digitization, but it's really in support of something else. That's, I think, an important aspect in this as well.
Yeah, if I may interfere, I think there are a couple of interesting things in support of something else. And Joe, you were saying about how we do things and how the work is done. I think that the underlying element there, which is missing in the picture, is whom are you doing it for? And transformation is when you get to state where nothing of the old remains, in my view. So you're gonna, you can call it innovation, you can call it a risk taking or intelligent risk taking. You can break through the performance by getting out of your comfort zone and trying to do something else. But you're gonna have to have a system in place that helps you evaluate risks that you take, so that you can stop it anytime you're moving forward. But you really need to, I think, first of all, you really need to understand, how am I doing things? Fine, but whom am I doing it for? So who your customers are, and they're we can talk about customers later on, but as an organization, you first want to start understanding, whom are you delivering this value for? Joe, you were talking about the value creation, and I think this is the fundamental element that you first need to understand whom are you delivering that value to, and then you'll come to those keyword processes and ERPs and platforms and everything else, which is just there in support to you satisfying your customers' requirements. But I think the starting point is defining who your customers are and who are not your customers, because you don't want everyone to be your customer. And I think we're going to talk about that later on.
If I can also add something more, I fully agree with Dan about what he just said before, and also with Strian. But I just would also, remind that specifically in the recent years, probably also the impact of external factor like the legislation of the government can have an impact on the transformation of multinational entities or single companies. I just remind, for example, in Italy, 2 years ago, we have introduced the electronic invoicing, and this was something that at the beginning was seen as something very, very strange and very far from all the taxpayers, and now it's something that all the companies has implemented, and it radically changed all the invoicing process in the companies, also bringing a lot of efficiency in many departments.
Yeah, I have to concur with Aaron. So in a way, we cannot really be speaking about VAT in the finance transformation isolated from the context that we are living. So clearly, the fact that the authorities are pushing the pedal to the metal in digitalization is helping us a lot to make our voices heard. Otherwise, I think I wonder, could we be could have any seat on the table, be capable of, I don't know, addressing our concerns with the issues that we are experiencing? Probably not, right? Because we will look like these are freaks that are coming with things that cannot be delivered, like virtual plans, tax point dates in invoices, and things like that, right? But you either have an audit, you are experiencing a lot of painful cases where the authorities have detected all these errors, or you have then now the other authorities asking you to provide them the information in real time. And then, I mean, it's not you, right, asking for something, it's somebody else. And I think really helps you a lot in preparing the business case to be to have a proper investment in the VAT field. So I think we can develop all of these themes later.
Yeah, you opened a very nice door for, let's say, a follow-up discussion. You mentioned getting a seat at the table or having a seat at the table, and I know, and also from experience, I know that it may be very difficult to get a seat at the table and get a seat at the right table. So I would like to discuss, well, okay, how do you get involved? At what stage do you need to get involved? How do you build, let's say, your strategies? How do you create alliances with relevant stakeholders and customers in your organization, and maybe build joint agendas to also carry your digital tax or digital indirect tax agenda? And Aaron, if I can start with you from let's say an overall tax perspective as well, how do you create this seat at the table?
Hi, thank you, Peter, for the question. I mean, let's say, I mean, there might be, different angles of approach. I think that one of the key points is, of course, kind of personal soft skill. It's very important, to create empathy with the colleagues, try to understand which are the key departments in the different projects, in the different topics. And of course, I mean, there are also some legislative or let's say legislative aspect again. One thing that really made the difference, for example, in our group in the last 3-4 years was the implementation of an internal audit framework, which was in line with the Italian law. And basically, all this implementation brought a very high level of attention also to the board of directors, and the board of directors give very strict instruction to some departments. And let's say one of the bottom line aspects was, also the penalties, which are related to the not implementation of such controls or such procedure. So in this sense, it was very let's say interesting to see how the stakeholders were involved and were at the same time very careful of these points, and how the other departments, considering these aspects of the penalties, were approaching the tax department and were very keen and very responsive in contact the members of the tax department to organize meetings and to be always sure that there was an alignment with the tax team.
Yeah. Yes, I agree to that. The need for tax control framework or for tax control management system to avoid severe penalties was probably very helpful for that, to getting the seat on the table. But also what helped with that were two additional things. One thing is, as I'm leading a team, we are having a limited capacity of resources for doing all the tax compliance. And for that, it was really helpful to note down which type of work we are doing, how many hours do we spend for what. And if then the leadership comes up with happy new ideas for new restructuring, and then you can easily say, okay, we can do that. We can do a new VAT registration in the country. This costs us this external resources and this internal resources, and you can name it, and you can really put a number to it. And that was the first time when we got the full visibility, and this was also quite helpful to see, okay, can I do something with, for example, technology to reduce this number of internal and external cost? And that was also a good driver in that. And then the third one is, and it's really ongoing training in the key areas of your company. So I can remember the first department I've ever trained was order fulfillment, because we have so many chain transactions in our company, and it's really important to see how is the transport going and so on, and of course all the other, like IT department and supply management, of course, as well. If you set up regular trainings, you set up a network, and then you always have a place in discussions if there is something going on. That's helpful. And then the fourth, what you not always can influence is like sourcing out accounting areas to shared service department. If this happens, then usually you end up in a situation where before you had people who were working 10 to 20 years on the same job, so you had experienced people. Now in the shared service department, you're having people that haven't even learned this before, and then they come to you, and after a year they are gone. They're gone to another company, and so the fluctuation is quite high. The skills are quite low when they come in. So all of a sudden, within the accounting area, just for example, accounts payable, you need to set up something to cover this additional risk. And that's also a really big driver.
Any other thoughts from the group, Joe? For example, you're in tax transformation already for quite a while. So what's your experience in building alliances with, for example, IT that speak a completely different language than traditional tax and finance people?
Yeah, well, maybe just to, I think, so I've worked with a number of companies, GE, HP. Fortunately, in Medtronic, we are a medical device company. So, the customers whom we sell to, VAT is really an issue in the context of pricing. And similarly, when we participate in government tenders, we need to demonstrate our full tax obligation. So it's easier to get a seat at the table, first of all. I think just to add on to what the rest of the guys said, first of all, in any transformation, you have an obligation to do no harm. Second of all, you need to understand what's your own risk appetite and also the risk appetite of your customer and the business entirely, because, we all know it's not possible to do everything. We do not have 100% risk coverage. So you need to appreciate that. And the other thing I would add is you typically need to be a trailblazer. So in the context of the question that came up on the Q&A, I think you need to look at your people and say, guys, who wants to learn about artificial intelligence? Who wants to learn about RPA? Who has the appetite to learn about Power BI and dashboards, and really build a proof of concept using those? And certainly in my team, that's what we're doing. And we are then showing that to the rest of the tax function. And even outside of tax, we're bringing those kind of solutions to the rest of the company. And that essentially, it's marketing, it gives you a credibility. And there's a risk in going, and we fail with some of the projects we execute, but actually we're happy to fail and to learn and keep iterating. And one of the things I've emphasized to my guys is, guys, do not be afraid to release something that's not perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect, but at least we're learning as we go. That's my view, is you do need to be brave. You need to dip your toe into the water and learn, and also give time to your people to learn and to fail, and that they have a certain proportion of their week where they can invest in technology and build their skills.
I fully agree with Joe. I think it's key that you just start. You just start small, but the main thing is that you start on a project and then ramp up with the learning experience. Don't make the plan too big. But for example, with RPA, there are a number of vendors out there that already offer all kinds of trainings online for free. If you have somebody that's interested, find that person in your company, give him some hours to experiment, and then just start on a mini project. But just go and do it. That's the key thing. Yeah, fully agree.
I would add something else. So I think you need to understand the dynamics of power in a company, because otherwise, I mean, how are you going to know? I mean, what to do in order to be heard? So I think then you need to look at how is the tax function perceived, whether everybody is thinking that tax is just about reporting. And if that is the case, then your power influence will be much lower, and then if you are perceived as a value-added, value generating function. But even then, right? I think you as a person, as an individual, you can be your reputation will be measured by your achievements. But that, I think Joe has said something about the credibility that you are bringing on the table, right? So if you are consistent in how you are interacting with everybody, how responsive you are, how serious you are, obviously, then you will have more to say, more to influence in that organization. So here, I think I would start recommending that everybody gets along with finance and controllership, especially with controllership, because they are the first ones worried about write-off, VAT audits, provisions, and so forth. So they will listen to you because they know that otherwise, I mean, you will. I wouldn't say you ruin the numbers, but you can really have and so not positive influence in the final outcome of the financial statements. And one last remark. So the thing is that if either VAT is part of the finance transformation, or if it's not, then sooner or later, more sooner than later, you will need to run it as a separate project, and that will be much costlier, much painful than otherwise could be. So if you are moving, I don't know, to S/4HANA, so try to be part of that discussion. If you are not, then problem is that you will be facing for the next 5 or 6 years a lot of not pleasant experiences with that. You will be constantly in escalation mode. Everybody will be kind of annoyed with why that was not addressed earlier. So, but it's not really, there is not really a one size fits all answer. So I think you just need to make your way in the organization, try to escalate and to be vocal about what really is important, and especially if you're head of taxes in the US, try to be communicate as much as you can about what is the importance of VAT and bring numbers. I think it really helps to show the flow through of your company, how much VAT you pay, what are your refunds, have a lot of data collected that you can show, and they say, well, what if we did something wrong? It's 1% that can represent X amount of money. So now tell me, do you think that we can really put all of this good work at risk if we don't invest in this area, whatever? There are a lot of technologies that we can speak about later that can really help you in that, let's say, journey.
Yeah, let me add to that. I totally agree. It is, back to Fran's point, where we were talking about penalties avoidance as one of the criteria for telling our story. I think we need to move away from that criteria alone, and back to what's been said earlier and what Gorka was pointing to, the value creation has to be our new paradigm. Otherwise, VAT as a downstream process is always going to be there for us, to clean the dirt after everyone else has had their word to say and has gotten their seat at the table. So you really have to, as Gorka mentioned, have to communicate better to find those results that are aligned to the overall, destination and that company's mission statement that we are after. Define those results and be able to speak them out. So if you have a good story and if you have good results to say, then there are 80 to 90% chances you'll get a seat at the table. So and if we are always telling the same story that nobody wants to hear about, how much penalties we're going to pay, because some governments are imposing on us new reporting requirements that nobody wants to look after. It's your job, it's your VAT job, so go and get it done. But if you can transform that conversation into into something that fits into that overall result-driven vision, then you get better chances at being heard.
Yeah, I think that's all valuable comments, and it's really chiming your message to the business needs rather than trying to adjust the business needs to your tax or indirect tax needs. And if you look at the tax function, and specifically at the indirect tax function, there's always for many of our indirect tax colleagues, there is quite a wish list of things that we would like to improve, things that we notice go wrong, that are sometimes earmarked as incidents, sometimes they're more systemic, and even things that are good, maybe more executed more efficiently. And basically, two questions is the first one is, well, okay, do we see finance transformation from this indirect tax perspective, and getting your wish list on the table? Do we see this as an opportunity, or do we see this as kind of a threat for already existing and well-run processes? And how do you deal with your let's say tax must-haves and nice-to-haves in the overall concept of a finance transformation? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, if I can add something to the question, Peter. Well, recently, last year in Valentino, we structure a kind of organized meeting periodically with some other departments. One of these is of course the IT department, which is key for the tax implementations. And as you were mentioning, it's funny to say that in this meeting we have the priority and the desiderata things. So what we would like to have, but I mean the management or the organization has not all the possibility to implement in a very short time. And I think this is a good point to implement, to organize in a company, because I mean there are a lot of projects, there are a lot of change in the law. For example, I think many of you has listened about the OSS regime regarding the distance sales, and this is something which had a huge impact in our organization. Of course, mainly on the European business. But also the e-commerce business is having a very huge impact on all the structure, and among the structure, also the tax department is part of this new revolution in the business models. And so it's part of the game. It's part of the game, to be able to join, the day-by-day organization, and to try to of course, divide which are the priorities, so which are the strategic activities, and which are, the operational day-by-day activities. And of course, it's a game. It's a game that you have to play your role. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, in the sense that your request can be, put it on the top of the list or not. But it's in any way very important to try to organize this activity in order to be there, in order to make listen your voice.
Hey, and if you look at, let's say, playing this game, there's also, let's say, opportunities with respect to cash planning, cash flow planning, specifically in customs and also VAT. That's not typically with finance, but that's part of day-to-day business basically, and what business managers are responsible for. Do you include, let's say, the regular business in this game?
I mean, sometimes, you know, the leverage of the cash in or cash out is part of the game. There have been many cases where, you know, we put on the table also the potential savings, which are material savings in a short term. And in that case, of course, you put also some pressure on the other side of the table. That can be, you know, the IT department, or in some case, the top management. So that can also be part, you know, of the factors to be considered in order to push on some specific areas.
Okay, thanks. Dan, you were going to chime in. Sorry for interrupting.
No problem. Yeah, I think you're fully you're right about the opportunities. I think they're very underrated. So we're always good at calculating how much things cost, but we don't factor in the benefits. We often find them too subjective, or they cannot be priced, or they only materialize in a distant future. But it is much more holistic to look at a business from a higher altitude, so to say. It's almost self-evident. And if you can get that message across that these benefits might not end up in your team, but somewhere else, and then it will force you to work with other departments that might not even have recognized that benefit. If you just take an example of tax logic, if your ERP system doesn't have a lot of tax logic, it means that your order fulfillment people likely will have to work with some kind of a complicated Excel grid, which is frustrating. It might lead to delays in the payment if there are a lot of credit and rebills. So if you step out and go to that other department and say, hey, there's a benefit for you in this project as well, and not only stay in your own box and actually make these opportunities more explicit, then my experience is that you can get much more done, because there's also a good vibe to the project, because you really look at the opportunities as well. And you implicitly are forced to work with other departments. And I think that's, any company will appreciate such a cross-functional project. That's my experience, at least.
That's true. I had also the experience, I mean, when you try to buy in some technology to help you on that, then you should have a good business case at hand. And of course, the business case can have a portion of penalties that can be avoided each year, which is money, but the money can be savings in other departments. And as a good example, you can have the same example on accounts payable side, for example, where you can save time when you can put in more logic and save time for tax determination there. So and when you go to the management and tell them, okay, we can have these savings, and then you get easier decisions, and you can even drive IT working on that. And with the business case, you should also consider, and this is one thing that we were going through, and I was able to, we had a conflicting project in IT, and I was able to delay the other project because I could tell them that the tax technology will help us on this other project as well, to make it easier and faster to be implemented.
So yeah, one comment in terms of must-haves and not nice to have. So I can't agree more with what Dan mentioned. In France, you're right. You have to spell out your requirements, but then how do you get to those key work processes? I think this is fundamental, and it depends obviously on the organization you're in. But looking at what do you want to automate, what do you want to get rid of. Peter was saying, there are some, or Joe was saying earlier, there are some processes you want to walk away from because they're unnecessary or not adding any value. So I think you have to look at those key work processes that are there with unique purpose, which is for creating that distinctive value for your customers. Now, who your customers are, again, I'm getting back to that, is critically important for you to understand what is your strategic position there, and how do you define those key work processes, and how do you measure them to understand and hear back from your customer. And you can hear back from your customer by different means. You can hear from them. They would tell you how happy they are with what you deliver, or just by their action, you'll get to understand that tax administration is not happy by the nature of your, content of tax returns or other compliance reports. So you'll get to know that, and you can define what your key work processes are that you must have for the value creation. And there is no longer must have or nice to have that IT organization or somebody else is going to impose onto you. It is you going out to the organization and spelling out your must haves, and you want to walk away from those nice to haves that most of the time are just waste of the time.
If I may chime in, so I think nowadays it's difficult to cover everything that eventually the tax authorities might be pushing for, as they are working in a very uncoordinated fashion. But still, one has to be able to transmit the idea that the real-time reporting is one way or the other the main digital trend for most of the tax administrations, and that means that one has to redesign its VAT reporting function. So clearly, you cannot manipulate the data anymore after it's being processed. So everybody in your organization has to realize that. So we are at the moment of time where if a mistake is done at the point of processing an invoice, it will go directly into the hands of the authorities. Let's take the case of Italy, right? So, I mean, yeah, you might be doing the reporting afterwards, but that is going to be a compilation of all the data that has been transmitted to the tax authorities via this electronic invoicing system to the SDI. So what is the main consequence? Well, then you need to change your strategy. I mean, how you position your reporting responsibilities in the company. You just need to make it very clear that it's more about cleaning up the master data, or investing in tax determination tools such as the ones that Vertex is offering in the market, because otherwise, I mean, you will not be able to navigate successfully these uncharted waters. I say uncharted because we are experiencing this for the first time, at least in Europe, right? In other years, like Latin, they've been doing that for quite a while, so they know, I mean, what is to deal with it. But here in Europe, I mean, for us, is pretty recent. So what we've done at Lexmark in my company is that we have invested in a tax engine. We have just one dedicated IT professional that is helping us with keeping our processes updated, because even if a tax engine is a must-have in my view, not a nice-to-have, you also need to invest some time in kind of customizing things here and there. But it saves a lot of time. It's not comparable to doing the tax logic in SAP with tables and all that. So I don't recommend that, because it can be a hell of a work. And on top of that, what we've done also in our company is to redesign the SAP report that we use in order for the basis to prepare the VAT and interest report. So and on top of that, besides that, I would recommend that people are also exploring the VAT reporting tools. I think I heard a couple of days ago that Vertex has a very good one, but there are also other players in the market that you can use. For example, in Lexmark we use EY GVRT, and that also helps in the countries that still haven't really gone fully into digital reporting to do the reporting by yourself, right? So I think there are a lot of technology that you need to explore, but don't get really trapped in the idea that technology by the sake of technology will really solve all our problems. It also requires that once you buy that technology, you do a lot of cleaning up, a lot of work with all the management processes of the management teams, and as I think Franz mentioned earlier, and many others that come to my mind, because otherwise you will really fail miserably. So you just need to put all of that on the table. problem is that it's costly. So many companies will be not reacting very well to the business case, because they will see, well, you need to spend X amount of money. What are the benefits? Because they don't see the benefits. And all companies look at the pros and cons, or the return of investment, and with VAT it's kind of difficult. I think Sandra was mentioning something in the chat, Sandra Steves, about the possibility of mentioning or referencing to the opportunities that can be linked to all the transformation. So here maybe you can really put do some kind of estimates about the potential things that you can really achieve, not only focusing so much on penalties but on value creation. Although that doesn't necessarily mean that because of you bring all this technology, all these savings will flourish, will surface immediately. You will need to accompany maybe that with the fact that once you are freed up, for example, to do more strategic work, you could really be providing those cash flow benefits. Whereas now you are dragged into VAT reporting because you have no tools. Your people are having miserable time with the reports. Then they don't have time to look beyond that.
You mentioned
it's really about bridging that gap between your customers' requirements, and again talking about those customers, whatever we define it, tax authorities, your supply chain team, accounts payable, order fulfillment, whomever in your organization matters to you. But you have to understand what their requirements are, and bridging that gap with their satisfaction, with their current satisfaction, and any aspect to it can be brought into that benefit analysis that you can include in your storytelling.
Yeah, let's dive a little bit deeper into that that benefit story, because traditionally tax departments are, let's say, cost centers. They're not profit centers. So, well, okay, is there a need to make that shift? And in relation to that, well, okay, if you build this business case, if you say, well, okay, we want to display the benefits, to what extent is that business case risk driven, so basically risk avoidance driven, and to what extent is that really driven by efficiencies and opportunities? And what's the appetite for each of them in your organizations?
Peter, I would say that I think we talked about earlier, but unless you have some war stories, it's difficult to build a business case on risk. If you've had situations where you failed an audit and you've suffered penalties, then people within the company will feel it. But my preference has always been to build on efficiencies and build on opportunities, whether that opportunity be a P&L opportunity or I think we mentioned the cash flow opportunities, so working capital, and certainly within Medtronic we focus on three things. We focus on top line growth, so turnover. We focus on bottom line growth, being net income, and we focus on working capital. And the good news relative to our colleagues in the rest of the tax department is that we contribute to above the line. It's that's where VAT has an advantage over income tax, for example. That's where, from a management reporting perspective, people are really interested in what we contribute to their results.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just you cannot always separate risk from efficiency in that case, because what we're doing for VAT perspective is always to avoid any risk. So the work that we ask from other departments in our company, let's say, for example, shipping department, to gather all the proof of deliveries which you need for VAT exemption, or correct posting of invoices, or correct invoice being issued when we sell goods. This is all compliance or part of compliance, but it's done by other departments. And if we are able to support them in a way that not only the quality gets better, but they also save man days or FTEs, then you have a business case. And I think that's also one of the keys. So, for example, and just to give you one example, which is not in your scope maybe, but for the proof of deliveries, we identified this is one of our highest company risks, because based on our sales volume for intra-community sales, it's a number that is unbelievable when we are not able to have this proof of deliveries in our files. And I know our shipping departments are working hard to get these documents, to review them, and to archive them. And so there I had a good business case to say, okay, when we are able to find an automated solution for that, we can save so many man days or FTEs, and that helps these departments, because usually, they have a really enough work to do. Besides just taking care of the VAT-driven proof of delivery.
And Franz, may I ask you a follow-up question? How did you get, to break through that level of denial that we all face in our organizations, where people would tell you, well, no, not a big deal, not a high risk. How did you get to impose on your operations to go and get those proofs of delivery? Did you face any resistance saying, well, we've never been challenged before on that, so why should we do it now?
Okay. In that case, it helped a little bit that in Germany we got really the need of the tax control framework. And when you set up a tax control framework, of course, you identify your risks. So I mean, you don't hunt the low risks, but you have to go for real big risks. And you have to put numbers behind it. And then afterwards, of course, you have to go to your leadership and tell them, because they are in charge for the risks. And if you put numbers behind it, it's impressive. And then, as Gorka said, you have to communicate these numbers, and that helps then. And yeah, well, this is one thing, but I think it's I've been working for John Deere for almost 20 years, so so I was always giving trainings and telling the people, communicating, putting numbers. So it had been a long project to raise the awareness for these things. It wasn't there at the beginning, but I was able to, but when it's there, then to get new things, to get things that help you, you have to spend money on that, and then you should not only, as already people said, you should not only say, hey, these are our risks, but you should also say, this is the money we can save in other departments when we have an automation on that.
Yeah,
and you can use this manpower. I mean, meanwhile, it's not only the cost anymore for manpower. I mean, I don't know how it is in your companies, but to get people to do it is a problem already. Even when we get resources approved, we don't get resources anymore.
Yeah.
So for the future, you have to go for technologies to automate things, because who should do it?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting thing you mentioned here. I think I think there is a cultural element that gets into play here, and depending what company you're working for, and working for a German company, which is kind of traditionally focused on the stakeholder approach, in comparison to the US multinationals, which are shareholder driven.
No. I'm
no.
working for the US company. Sorry to
US.
say that. Yes.
But
John Deere is a US
okay,
company.
right? Yeah. Well, lucky you that you got your compliance issues to be considered by your chief risk officer. Even chief compliance officer in some places wouldn't want to know about VAT, right? So it's really interesting to hear from you. Thank you. There is one thing I like to repeat time and again. I heard from Jeff Beck. He's a top leader in taxology, and he would say that very often he would cite Peter Drucker saying, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." right? So it's really pretty much important to understand, what environment you are in. That Gorka you were talking about, that you need to understand your powers repartition within the organization to know where to go and whom to talk to.
Hey Joe, question to you. It was already referred to. Well, okay, it's people and capacity maybe kind of issues, and you refer to several technologies deployed within Medtronic, amongst others Alteryx. I'm not an Alteryx expert, but what can you do with it? How do you deploy that? Just very briefly.
Yeah, so I guess Alteryx kind of does 5 key things. It helps with data analytics. It helps kind of that ELT, extract, load, and transform, summarizes data, and also gives specific outputs. So one of the ways we use it, we use artificial intelligence to constantly analyze our product master data. We have an output from that AI tool, which then we have Alteryx lifts. We use Alteryx to refer that product master against revenue, and then we push it through to a dashboard. So essentially, we've got all of those technologies hanging together to give us the output, which is a dashboard. And in that dashboard, it tells us what products has the AI tool told us that we've had it, we're selling at the high rate of VAT, and maybe it should be at the low rate of VAT. And it also tells us what's the revenue from it. So we're using that to make a risk evaluation. Do we want to do a deep dive on the VAT rate for that specific product, or are we satisfied where it's at?
Thanks for that, Joe. And that also triggers, let's say, a new question to me, and that has to do with people skills. And Dan, also please chime in, because I know you're a coding expert by now. But traditionally, as tax people or VAT people, we were legislation driven. In the old days, which most of us will probably even recall, people went to meetings, they brought the legislation with them and started looking up specific cases. And now it's all about data, processes, and technology. So I'm very curious, what's, let's say, these new approaches, what kind of impact that have on what we require from people and from our teams?
I think just the enormous amount of data and data points that will become available will also force tax people to, have to learn something about how you actually can work with that data. Some of that data will be structured, some of that data will be unstructured. The Internet of Things is coming up, all kinds of satellite applications that might start pinging back data points to your ERP system. So you already have the traditional tools in an Excel file, but Excel might not even be, able to cut that anymore, because the data is simply not structured. You will have to align it, and then indeed coding skills can come in. So if you take a simple Python course and you learn how Python can interact with something that is called pandas. It's a coding technique between Python and Excel. And it is just a fashion of just manipulating data in the right order to do that. In the old days, you would go to an IT department and say, here's the spec, please draft a report for me. But with all the pressure on IT, they might not even do that anymore. So already now they say, well, you should do more with your Excel skills. There are a lot of items that you might not be even using when you are still working with VLOOKUPs, for example. There's advanced technology in Excel and in Power BI that can do the same trick. So getting more tools in your electronic toolkit, I think that's a very, very valuable skill to develop for any kind of tax expert in the near future. So just taking a coding course, and that doesn't even have to be a long course. If you spend 15 hours on a Python introduction course for free on YouTube, you will know the basics about that. But then it's easier for you also to talk to the IT guys, and you will find out where also the complication sits when you would ask them to write a report. They will come back with you with a story about the storage capacity, the storage space that some reports will take. So it's much more, you will see that these two worlds will start to join together, and trying to steer away from it, I think it's set to fail, because there will be so many data points you will have to deal with. If you can't handle that, then you will not be able to do an analysis anymore. Excel will not be equipped to do these kind of calculations anymore, I think.
Any other thoughts? Any thoughts
Yeah.
about, do we have, because capacity is one thing, do we have the capacity within your teams and also within your companies, and a strategy also within your companies to take people to the next level? Or is this expected to be kind of own individual private initiatives for people to stay employable given these developments? What's your thoughts?
Well, I think it's a kind of a mix, and Peter, you are right. You need a broad skill set if you want to connect of the tax laws with the technical possibilities, and I mean, if you want to set up automated plausibility checks, just for example, you need of course, to understand the tax laws, because otherwise you do not know what to check, and you need, of course, then to understand how the technology works. And so you need you need people who can combine these two skills, and a pure tax lawyer is not able to do that work. But on the other hand, a pure technical guy may also not be able to do that. That's one thing. Or you need to form teams. So one thing, I mean, I've been always quite interested in mathematics and to automate things. That's a long story, and I really have a favor for this. But I also now started to add one team member to my team, new one who has only data experience, who is really a data expert.
I think that's very valuable to just have somebody in your team that has that hardcore data science background. Yeah. Somebody, mathematics, physicists, don't care, but that's a very, very valuable asset in any tax team, I think.
I agree.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating, let's say, topic, Dan. I definitely will enter into YouTube in the coming days, because you put me something interesting to watch. But no, I mean, if I have to think what happens in my experience, I think it's a clever point. It's something absolutely interesting for the current profile of a tax job, or a tax man or woman. Probably the difficult it's that sometimes I mean, our tax team are not so big. So I don't know your experience, but I have a colleague dedicated to the indirect taxes, one to the direct taxes, another one on the international tax, and when we have to perform our interviews, we have to to put on a balance the theoretical skills and the practical skills. And of course, currently and personally, I'm not always ready to leave the technical skills completely aside. So I want someone that definitely has a technical experience, better, of course, if with some background in a tax firm, or of course in another tax department, but also looking to the tax law aspects. And of course, having a mix is always a plus. The idea to have a profile which is 100% dedicated, or coming with a background on data analytics or mathematics, or a scientific profile, it would be definitely interesting, but probably I see something more for a big structure, something more, kind of US big companies, or also multinational entity with a strong and also in terms of people, big tax department.
Aaron, I think you nailed it, right? Because I was going to be flagging the same point. So we shouldn't abandon what we are, right? So it's true that now we are confronted with new realities. So we need to adapt and we need to keep learning, because if we don't keep learning, then we get obsolete. But I don't see, I don't think that tax should really become something what is not, right? So I think tax is not the IT department, and the IT department cannot be the tax department. So you just need to bear in mind that it's good that you learn about, what is in the market, what are the technologies that can be used. Maybe, you have the chance to hire or train somebody in your team to become better at Alteryx, as Joe mentioned, or Python. Sorry, I think I'm not pronouncing it well. Python, right? Python. Like Dan mentioned, it's great, right? It will help you a lot. But I see that we still need to deal with how to tax transactions, how to review contracts, how to become strategic advisors to the business, and that means that you need to keep on studying the law, understanding the upcoming European court cases, and all that. So that is still going to be there, right? But you cannot really believe that everything else will take it by itself, because that's not the case. So, but the good thing about this new reality is that there will be new roles, right? I think Sergio mentioned somebody who's a guru in taxology. I think, well, Sergio, you get that certificate, so you are properly now. We can call you as a taxologist. So there are new professions, right, that will be created out of all this reality, but I still think that in the tax department we need to be strategic in many senses. So it's not just about how we send data, how we prepare a report, or how we do some spotting of errors. It's much more than our function. So, but that's a diverging view in a way.
Gorka, I assume it depends a little bit on the size of the company. So if it's big enough and you can afford having a specialized people, then it's good. But when you have such a quite small size as John Deere has, I think I cannot afford just focusing on giving legal advice. Also, I mean, I'm a tax lawyer, so I can do that. But the departments come to me and ask. They have a new business transaction. They do not only want to know what is the impact. They directly want to know how they can implement it, how they can realize it. And then I need to have at the moment the SAP knowledge to tell them, okay, you have to do that, and then it works. And so they want to have a full advice, not just only a part of it, and just leave them alone. It's your problem. You have to solve it.
It's a great angle, Franz, that I would like to.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Just one more to say, and then VAT historically always meant to know a little bit about the system, because VAT is mass. It's a mass of invoices. It's a mass of data. It's so you have hundreds of. I mean, we have each month we have more 200,000 invoices just in Europe that need to be okay, that need to be compliant, and without IT, I'm lost. So VAT was always a part, or was going beside IT always, not just now.
There's one interesting angle in these comments. There's a lot of new technologies. They also develop quite fast. Joe mentioned AI. You have a tool like Alteryx, but it's not a stable kind of environment. And there's a lot of, let's say, real experts out there. And we as a tax team, we could say, well, okay, we recruit a data specialist, or we recruit an AI specialist, or we recruit an Alteryx expert. But it's only one person that you then recruit and add to your team, with the risk of this person also still being isolated, being remote from let's say, the technical developments. So that also raises the question, well, okay, is this a viable strategy, or should you actually look more at the outside and say, well, okay, let's, for example, ask the big fours or technology firms to support, let's say, these insights and these dashboards and support from a technology perspective, rather than build this with the risk of becoming obsolete quite quickly within your own team. And that was also basically kind of a comment in the chat from the audience. What's the risk of having, let's say, limited knowledge in this specific technology area coming from a tax perspective, then start executing and deciding based on that, without the real in-depth specialized expertise? Just a challenging question.
Peter, maybe I'll just tell you what we're doing. So to some of the questions the guys have mentioned, we have the advantage of scale, first of all. But what our strategy at least is to create a group of super users. So essentially you've identified specific people who are experts in Power BI, Alteryx, etc., RPA. But the idea is that they do not become experts in isolation. Their role is not just to apply that expertise and to deploy it throughout the tax department. It's also to educate people. And that's the other, in our tax transformation project, it's about self-sufficiency. So self-sufficiency in the context of, we would prefer to have the expertise in-house, deploy it in-house, than have to buy in. Because, unfortunately, sometimes when a big four might deploy a solution, really you don't understand how that solution works 2 years down the line. And that's typically what we all see with macros, for example. So our strategy, group of super users, educate the business, educate everybody within the tax function, help to find use cases, deploy them, and educate the owner of that process. And also, like I said, self-sufficiency is a critical part of our model.
Any other thoughts, Gorka, Surjan?
Yeah,
Maybe.
couple of. Sorry, Gorka, did you want to go ahead first? No, I think those core competencies that you're talking about are really, again, all about your processes. So yes, you will want to have a process for everything you do as a VAT organization, and you want to deliver that value to your customers, but then you're going to have to look at yourself and decide how good am I at creating value, delivering that value in those key work processes that are required to satisfy my customers' requirements, including the tax authorities. I look tax authorities as a key customer of mine. Now, there are some core competencies that if you're honest to yourself, that you will not have, and you will there have to decide whether you want to develop that with your own folks, and you want to develop those core competencies in-house. And I have a tendency to agree with, I'm inclined to agree with Joe with what he was saying. I would rather prefer to have that knowledge and expertise in-house rather than outsourcing that expertise and becoming dependent on third parties. Or depending on the process, again, you would admit that there is no chance you can develop that in-house, and you may want to decide to outsource. Just a thought. And again, you will want to consider the efficiency. I think Dan was talking about data and analysis and the importance of that's I cannot but I cannot agree more on that. But it is also a question about efficiency. And what it costs you, and is it is it exceeding the value that you get back from your customers? So you will have to take different layers of considerations into account before deciding whether you outsource or keep things in house. Gorka, you.
No, I mean, I cannot agree more. I think it's a difficult balance. It's a balancing act. At the end of the day, you just need to see, depending on the size, as Franz was saying there, sometimes you may have to do more than giving advice. The thing is that in my case, I really find it difficult, not because of my age, but because of my background to become, I don't know, somebody very competent in I don't know, in Alteryx, right? So I don't think that's my thing. I'm fortunate I have people in my team that are really quick at that. They are using Power BI, where they have created the dashboard. So, and I'm encouraging them to continue all of that. So I'm training one of them to become a kind of taxologist. So because he likes it, right? So, and I prefer to your point, saying that we do that at in-house than otherwise. But I still believe that there is a lot of activities that you cannot. I don't have the impression that you can do it in-house by yourself, unless you start really paying a fortune to hire a specific people, specific profiles, right? So I think we are really there in the middle of something really that new, that it's kind of it's uncharted waters for all of us. So we just need to kind of experiment. I think somebody was saying that don't be afraid before of making a mistake. I think it was you, no? So it's a question of applying that kind of philosophy that I think Karl Popper embraced many years ago, right? Like, so try to get to the truth little by little, and do some corrections on the go, right? And find your way. So I don't think that we can really hear. We have I don't know, the roadmap for all the companies that are out there, right? So I hope that still our attendants are finding all of our insights interesting to do a kind of pick and choose and see how they apply to their cases.
And there's one question from that also relates to this from or a comment actually from Anna from Nestle. And she mentioned, well, okay, it's really important in these roles to understand both tax and IT and really have hands-on knowledge and having actually done and executed the job rather than having kind of a theoretical approach. And then, Surgeon, you also referenced think that you know what you're doing. And is that also included in the team that you mentioned, Gorka? They people really, you mentioned they really like it. They also have the opportunity to basically explore and dive into these, let's say, combined tax and IT issues.
Yeah, I think we are finding that we need to kind of these hybrid roles these days. So you need to, because otherwise, I mean, how you communicate with IT? I've spent many hours like drafting a big business requirement document, explain everything about what the law says, send it to IT. I get no feedback. They don't understand a word. I'm doing my best, giving an example, the same thing. And now I've realized that it's better that I write less, and then I put somebody in my team that really translate that to IT, and it works much better. So because maybe I'm not really capable of doing it in a different manner. So yeah, you need to have like these people like acting as a bridge between pure tax and pure IT, and they need to know a little bit of tax. Obviously, they have a background in tax because they are doing tax reporting mainly. They know a lot about the system, SAP, Oracle, whatever. And that's why they can really refer to specifics in the systems that probably I wouldn't, because I'm not in that type of activity anymore. So yeah, we see that type of people that are really needed in our organizations. I've seen a lot of good questions, so I don't know. I think I was wondering, Robert, maybe we can, Peter, I don't know what you think. Maybe we can bring somebody into the into the I don't know, into the dashboard so that they can speak.
Yeah, let me encourage anyone who's here online. If you want to come on stage and ask a question or make your comment heard, raise your hand, click on the hand icon, and I'll bring you on stage. Makes it more fun that way, and we can expand the panel to include you. And meanwhile, we'll also review the comments and questions and see if we can make sure everyone's question is answered.
Yeah, well, let me say something while we wait for people to join us. Taxologists are covering up for that hybrid, which is called here hybrid role, and you don't really get into the level of skills that Dan was referring to, coding and structured, unstructured data analysis, but you get to become an architect, having a good depth of understanding of how all of these elements work together and how they sum up to something that Aaron was talking to earlier, that systems approach, having that holistic view that Harry was referring to in the chat box. So I think that's an interesting path to explore for anyone in tax. It's a new paradigm, I think. A new reality. Yes, Robert.
We have 2 people, maybe even 3. Let me see how many we can bring on. I have Anna from Nestle, who I'm bringing onto the stage.
Hello. Sorry, my camera is not working. I think I didn't accept to switch on the camera when I joined, so you can't see me. First of all, thanks for the panelists. It's very interesting. What I wanted also to add, and that was part of my comments, and that's where I hear in many round tables and also like sales pitch from other companies, is this tax technology and lots of training and being certificate. Based on my experience, and I've been in SAP for more than 20 years. I was working for Accenture before, but my background is also account and tax. I believe it doesn't come only from training, but from experience, so getting your hands dirty. I can't talk to my tax stakeholders if I don't understand tax, and then I can't go back to IT and translate everything. I'm not sure 9 months training will give me that balance and being able to be up to speed. And then obviously doing my right tax transformation strategy with my IT teams, with the latest technology. We all talk like AI, blockchain, these fancy and good words, but sometimes it doesn't apply to that company at that time. So yeah, just to make the point, maybe because I've been so many years working on that, so when I hear just training, no, I don't think training is enough.
Maybe Anna, if I can I agree, right? But actually, what a lot of those technologies, how they're being developed now, it's what they describe as citizen-led development, which means that you don't need an IT degree to be able to apply it. And I think certainly for most of the people on this call, our role isn't necessarily to deploy, it's to figure out where the use cases and develop a strategy and line up the resources. So yeah, for example, there's a company called CorpTax, which is an income tax reporting tool in the US. CorpTax, I learned recently, they have an award scheme, right? So they say, well, here's kind of the top 10 deployments of our technology. And it just literally describes what was the before, the middle, and the after. And it's describing a use case to you. And so my role in that situation is to look at the use case and see all of those use cases for their awards for 2021, let's say, and say, is there anything there that's applicable to us? Do we have an analogy of a similar problem and here is the solution that somebody else has found? So I think that's personally, I have no interest. I can barely turn on a computer. That's not my role. It's to figure out, like I said, find the situations, find the resources, and encourage the people in my team to investigate and to deploy and to come back and ask me for funding or extra resources. That's how I see my role in this situation.
And I think it's also about, well, let's say the basic understanding of what a certain tool will actually mean. And let's say, take the example of AI. You have strong and weak AI, and we know that the tax office also works with these tools. They have algorithms with, well, thousands of data points in it. Let's think ahead 5 years. And maybe the tax office then has algorithms that can just say, based on all the companies that we have in our database, we predict that this will be your tax amount, right? There's just a prediction. And then the tax office will come to you with a file with maybe 16, well, hundreds of probability indicators, but let's say underpinning that calculated amount, right? In algorithms, you have a concept that they call the black box problem. The stronger that the AI becomes, the less explainable it will be. And for us as tax lawyers, with a linear thinking model, thinking in a structure of, if this happens in this and this scenario, and this are the facts, then this will be the outcome. That methodology of thinking will not be applicable to how AI predicts the outcomes. So if the tax office comes to us and just say, okay, this is the amount you have to pay, then we might get stuck in our own thinking world, and we cannot even understand anymore what AI actually does. It's a prediction model based on statistics, and it will just give you a number, and you will not be able to, apply your linear thinking that you have been taught in school to that actual outcome that the tax office is going to present. So how would you defend against that audit, or defend against such an outcome? That is a totally different way of looking at algorithms and what it will mean for your profession. But it's important that you have that basic understanding what it will mean. So you don't become an expert, but you have to realize that this aspect of algorithms is also out there.
Let me bring in Andrew to the conversation as well.
Hi guys, can you hear me? Guys, can you hear me?
If he's, yep.
Yeah, you can, great. Yes, so I think many of you already know me, so hello to everybody. I think actually Dan makes a really good point there. I think the tax authorities are getting to a position where they should be able to run algorithms, not just based on data that you submitted in your last tax return, but the one you uploaded 5 years ago. And I think the importance of that digital link is essential, and that understanding of knowing that in the future, it's the integrity of the data that you're uploading has to be accurate, making sure from source to report that you can prove where that data's come from, is something that every sort of tax manager should be aware of, to then make sure that when reports or analytics or extracts are being built, that exists. We're doing a work for a client at the moment. We're helping them choose a tax engine. But part of that work is also making sure that their ERP that they're implementing is also being considered from an architectural point of view for tax. Because most ERP systems that are set up, tax and reporting are the last things anybody bothers to do, because they're complex and no one likes doing them. Whereas actually, if you don't consider tax, and an example I'll give is, hey, we're a service-based company, so we don't use the ship to, we use the ship to for something else. Well, actually, the ship to location could be where the service takes place. And, if you're doing installations or things like that as well, that type of information, if you haven't considered it when you're doing your actual architectural design, can actually then really severely restrict you later on. And I think another point I would make is, and I mentioned it in the chat, is there's always a risk of what we call have-a-go heroes, right? Tax and tax technology is a hot topic. Everybody wants to do it. And if you rely on, an Alteryx expert, for example, who has no understanding of tax, or someone in your ERP sort of team who has no real understanding of tax, to build a report, potentially based on an old ERP type report, they may actually not really understand where that data is coming from and what's important within that data. And I think the example I gave as well is that if you are using a sort of the main tax or the transaction tax table to pull all of your data for your reporting, but the VAT that's being recorded on bank charges is recorded in a legacy table in your cash management module, and no one picks that up, then your data is not going to be accurate. And I think so it's really important that you do have that right advice to make sure that whatever you're engaging on, you're pointed in the right direction. And I completely support what Joe's doing. He's spending the money to build a team. You've got to start somewhere. So where we would advise and recommend, you can speak to companies like ourselves or other tax technology firms out there can give you the advice. The sooner you can start building that in-house expertise, and even if it's just a little bit of knowledge, I think Anna was mentioning that she's doing X amount, she's not considering herself an expert. She probably knows more than most as what is needed. And I think the most important thing is knowing where to look or when to ask. They're the really important things, so that if you don't think something that you're doing is going in the right way, if you think someone who is buying a new product hasn't considered the tax, it's knowing that that's the point to stand up and say, hang on a minute, I don't know what the answer is, but I want to check from a tax technology point of view if we're doing the right thing. And then that's where you can then bring additional help in if you need to, or if you've been building your own team, the expertise within that team will gain that experience and will then be able to answer those questions themselves.
Was there anyone else from the audience? I think someone else raising their hand. Let me see if I can bring them on stage. It's, I believe, Adam. And thank you, Andrew, for your comment as well. Very interesting. Let's see if we can bring Adam on the stage. If you can introduce yourself and from what organization you're in. I think you're from Vertex, actually. So hopefully, can you hear us, Adam? Hello. Okay, I don't think, let me try one more time to hand him the mic. There might be a connection issue. Hi, Adam, can you hear us? You might want to check your microphone. Okay, maybe we have to move on to the next question and some chats coming in instead.
Let's have a look.
And Harry, did you want to come on stage? If so, I'll send you an invite and you can accept that if you would like to join. Let's see if I can do that real quick. If you can raise your hand, I will bring you on stage. I don't believe I can simply invite you. So, or if anyone else wants to come on stage. Okay, someone is raising their hand. I think it's Harry. 1 second.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, so I think, first of all, really, really good event. And it's nice to see one in this format, to be honest. I think the points that I was trying to make is maybe leaning my background in history. So before joining Innovate Tax and Andrew, my experience was very much orientated around service management and service management software. And when I first joined, Andrew and some of the other consultants always used to chime on about kind of control processes and tax control framework. Yeah, a lot of the customers that I tend to speak to, there isn't necessarily that level of maturity that we would expect to see from an IT team. And that's understandable. But I think as we introduce more of these technologies in, I think we really do need to have more of an emphasis on service management as a whole. Looking at actually how do we document our processes, and also how do we then manage the change within those processes. So for example, Alteryx is a great example. It's a brilliant tool, can automate workflows and help you file returns, for instance. But actually, the problems that we see is really around not necessarily configuring the tool, it's about really discovering those processes and putting the controls around the processes to make the tool work. Otherwise, when you come to do things like your return at the end of the month, the tool doesn't work because there's problems within the process. So I think there's probably a level of maturity that needs to take place within the tax teams about maybe how we manage that change process in particular, and then how we introduce that new technology as well.
Let me also.
I feel that makes absolute sense, because if you look at your indirect tax activities and your finance activities, there's always kind of a cohesive package of people, systems, processes, and your overall organization. And if you change something in any of these aspects, I feel you also immediately have to look at the others as well. So if you start relying on technology, you have to look at the skills of your people. You may be able to reduce. You may be able to centralize. At the same time, if you see external developments and additional reporting and pre-filled returns, you may think, well, okay, let's add additional people, or you invest in technology. So there's really, it's an integrated package from my perspective. You always have to look at it in conjunction. Do you agree, Sergeant?
Of course, Peter. I always agree with you. Yeah, thanks, Harry.
No problem.
Any other questions that we would need to discuss?
I know that Adam posted a comment because he was unable to go on the stage, but he just wanted to piggyback on Andrew and Joe's comment that tax technology will go beyond tax technologies, but requires a team who will bring individual skills. So I just wanted to make that point shared with the audience. And
yeah, I cannot disagree with Adam because he's my colleague. So.
And any other people would like to come on stage and join the panel? I know we were running a bit over time, so I'm aware of that. I'm conscious of time, but I think it's been worth it for a great interactive discussion for this event. So, and I know some of the panelists I think have meetings as well that started. So perhaps Peter, if you can summarize, and we can conclude the forum, and then we'll keep the recording on, so if people missed the beginning, they can watch the replay just by clicking on the schedule button and checking it out later.
Yeah. From my perspective, at least, it was a very interesting and engaging discussion, getting, let's say, the perspectives from various businesses and also from various roles, and also different levels of maturity. But I think there's a kind of a mutual agreement that we cannot escape, let's say, the need for including technology in our indirect tax processes, that we can benefit from it, and that also the overall, let's say, finance or maybe even business transformation that's going on is an opportunity for indirect tax to improve processes, to improve systems, but also to provide opportunities to our teams and to our employees to learn and to also develop other skills, and not be the kind of focused tax only kind of specialist, but have a bit of a wider set of skills that makes them able to also contribute more to the organization, and that may also put the indirect tax teams in a position where we are able to leverage the data that is used in indirect tax and bring value also from that perspective to the organization, not only from a tax perspective, but maybe also from an operational or a finance perspective. So thanks to everybody for the great discussion. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed your insights. I hope the audience also did. At least from my perspective, it was very valuable.
Yes,
thank you
to the panelists. I want to reiterate, it's been great to see you all again. The vast majority of you have spoken at our past events, so it's great to have you here all in one place for this type of interactive panel discussion.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all.
You're welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. We're going to keep the lounge open, so if any of you want to chat with each other, we still have about 60 indirect tax people here. So the tables will be open for private discussions. So if any of you want to have a chat in the lobby, just click on a chair and feel free to meet each other there. And but thank you all for being here. We'll stay in touch for future tax events. See you next time. Thank you all. Thank you, Peter and the panel. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks.